Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. I'm a big fan of Kiss Looms. I greatly enjoy mine, and I am cooperating with Kelly at Kiss Looms to make you a playlist of all the basic techniques that you might ever want to know on all of the looms. So welcome and enjoy.
Let's talk about making a segmented crown on a Kiss modular loom. We're going to pretend this is a hat, although it's only enough hat for, say, an elf, not a human being. But the principle is the same if you have 2 or 3 or however many times as many pegs. Now I've already knitted the body of the hat and we're ready to do the segmented crown. So the first row of it will knit completely normally on 1/4 of the total peg count. Actually, you can do this in thirds if you want, or in fifths, but 1/4 is so easy because you can set up the loom so that there are even quarters on each side. Now I'm going to decrease 1 stitch on each side and knit 2 rows in this case. How frequently you decrease is somewhat dependent on the number of pegs and the gauge. We're making little knitted triangles and we will sew those edges together. And the triangles need to be long enough to come to a point at the center of the hat in a graceful manner without either making too much or too little length of fabric. You'll see what I mean when I go to take it off. So I am estimating here that I want to knit at least 2 rows between decreases. Let's see what we're getting so far. Let's knit 1 more row and then decrease again. We only have a few stitches to work with here, and it's going to be a little bit different if you have lots of decreases to make, but we're only going to make a couple of them. Here I'm going to decrease again and knit at least 1 row. In this case, I think I'm definitely going to knit 2 or 3. Of course, when you decrease simply by moving the edge stitch in, as I have been doing, you knit the both stitches that are on the peg after the decrease over as though they were one on the next row. Whoops, there we go. Now you can see our triangle forming. Let's knit 1 more row, and then we'll bind off this triangle and move on to the next one. And on the next one, I'm going to show an alternate version of decrease. Though I would normally be consistent throughout the project, I'd just like you to see the options. Leave a goodish yarn tail, because we can later use those to create the seam. And I'm going to use this latch needle to pick up both stitches when we're down to 2. You can decrease down to 3, 2, or 1, depending on how many stitches you have to work with and your preference. 2 is ideal in my opinion. And pull the tail through that last couple of stitches, and there's our first triangle. Let's work on segment number 2 of the segmented crown. I've knotted a loop into the end of the yarn so as to be able to start it on one end peg of section 2. Then we're going to wrap all 6 stitches in this case. It could be any number depending on what 1/4 of the hat happened to be. We'll knit these over. Now this time, last time I did what's called the simple decrease, wherein I just took the edge stitch and moved it in. Works fine. The work gets smaller. However, seaming is easier if you leave this column of stitches being continuous and you make the decrease 1 stitch in. So now I have to move 2 stitches in as the effect of it, so as to have both things be true. The work gets smaller and yet the outermost
column of stitches is uninterrupted. And it just is a little bit neater and easier to seam if you do that. And that is called a full fashion decrease in most circles. Whoops. No, I'm right. I saw 2 stitches on my pegs and I thought, oh, I've already wrapped the row, but silly me, that is the effect of the decrease. So we had decided on 3 rows after this decrease. There's 1. And in this case, I do not slip the first stitch of the row. Slipping the first stitch, for those of you who recall, simply means not knitting the first stitch. And if it's going to be an exposed edge on whatever you're knitting, such as a scarf, very often that's the neater way to do it. But where you're going to make a seam on the stitches, generally you don't slip, you do go ahead and knit. Now, time for our next decrease. And if we had been doing a full fashion decrease up more like the size I'm making with my hands, a hat crown for an adult human being, we would have done lots and lots of full fashion decreases, and the very last one couldn't be. Because as you see, I cannot move these in any farther than they are. So the very last one can't be in any case, and it just so happens that the last one is our second one in this case. So for future reference, I probably would not bother doing a full fashion decrease on a mini hat of this size, which might be for a doll, say, because it's not going to make very much difference to the seaming. We don't have that much of a seam to work with. It would make a real difference on an adult hat. All right. That's it. That's our second segment knitted. Leave a good enough yarn tail to use to seam the segments together. Now I'm doing this with a latch hook, but of course you can use a yarn needle or whatever method you normally get your stitches off with. It's no biggie one way or the other. Pull it through. Now we've got 2 triangles knitted. I'm going to proceed off camera, so as not to bore you stupid, to make triangles number 3 and 4, and we'll get back together when that's taken care of. Here we are with 4 little triangles off the loom, and we're going to put the edges together as I'm holding them and seam each 2 sides together and complete the crown of the hat. And to do that, I will use these yarn tails. So I'll take care of that and show you when it's finished. Okay, here's our completed mini hat. It fits on my vitamin bottle, so I can show it to you. And you can see that there's a slight point at the top because I overestimated the number of rows by 1, possibly 2, but I think 1 fewer row at the very top would have gotten rid of that point. Of course, the point is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a fashion statement or part of the design. But if you want it to meet very smoothly across the top, then what you need to do is do the math and figure out what distance of rows will get you exactly to the midpoint of the hat right there, and knit not more and not less. But there it is, the segmented crown.